For 48 years, Voyager 2 has been our longest conversation with the universe. Launched in 1977, it carried our voice, the golden record, a fragile time capsule of sound and hope, past Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, and into the dark between stars. For decades, its faint signal whispered home across the void, a thread of radio light stretched over 20 billion kilometers. Every pulse, every data frame, a reminder that something built by human hands was still out there, still speaking, still alive. Until now. It started as a tremor, a subtle distortion in the carrier frequency. Then came a rhythmic interference, faint, deliberate, pulsing every 84.6 seconds. At first, Mission Control assumed solar interference. The sun had been restless that week, its corona bleeding electromagnetic noise across the deep space network. But this pulse was too clean. Too precise. When engineers filtered out the background radiation, what remained was a waveform, symmetrical, self-correcting, mathematical, not static, not random. Someone whispered, "It looks like modulation." For 12 hours, the pulse rode Voyager's transmission like a heartbeat beneath static, soft, steady, intelligent. And then, without warning, Voyager 2 went silent. Every receiver across the globe, from Canberra to Madrid to Goldstone, registered the same abrupt cutoff. No warning tones, no telemetry, no shutdown commands, just a single clean spike of signal energy, one final flare of coherence, and then nothing. The probe's voice vanished mid-transmission. Silence. At first, the team assumed an antenna misalignment. Voyager's orientation thrusters were decades past their design limits. A tiny shift could have knocked it out of range. But when NASA's deep space radar tried to ping its last coordinates, something strange happened. The radar echo came back wrong. It wasn't an absence of reflection, it was phase distortion. The returning wave was inverted, as if something had bent the signal backward. 3 hours later, a researcher noticed a chilling correlation. The moment Voyager's signal failed, down to the millisecond, matched a sudden flare inside 3I Atlas, the interstellar object still crossing the outer system. The same object that had been pulsing in harmonic resonance for weeks. The same object emitting red plasma bursts at an interval of exactly 84.6 seconds. The pulse that silenced Voyager had the same rhythm. The connection was undeniable. Voyager 2 had been caught in the heartbeat of something alien. The data was reviewed, replayed, stretched across every analytical model. But the deeper they looked, the stranger it became. The missing frames in Voyager's final signal weren't blank. They contained fragments of repeating data, waveforms that shouldn't exist in human transmission protocols. At first glance, they looked like noise, but when run through spectral decomposition, hidden patterns emerged, symmetrical bursts matching Atlas's pulse, perfectly aligned in frequency and amplitude. It wasn't interference, it was injection. Something had entered the signal. At JPL, the data engineers began to panic quietly. Voyager's transmission system wasn't designed to receive data, only to send it. For an external source to alter its outgoing frequency meant one of two things. Either Voyager had encountered an energy field strong enough to rewrite its carrier wave in real time, or something was transmitting through it. For the first time in years, the Deep Space Network operated in blackout mode. No public logs, no live data, only encrypted communications between 3 facilities, and a quiet request to correlate Voyager's last packet with the pulse activity from Atlas. The results were immediate. The shapes were identical. Each of Voyager's final waveforms matched the light patterns observed in Atlas's red plasma burst. Same duration, same rise and decay, same curvature. Voyager hadn't just been interrupted, it had been repurposed. For decades, the golden record had drifted in silence, a message of who we were, encoded in music and math, waiting for someone to find it. Now, it seemed, something finally had. And in return, it had used Voyager's own signal to speak back. When the team reconstructed the final transmission, a faint rhythm emerged beneath the static, a low hum, undulating like breath. At first, they thought it was equipment noise, feedback from a damaged receiver, but when they overlaid the waveform with Atlas's optical pulses, they aligned perfectly. the hum rising each time the comet flared, falling as it dimmed. The two signals weren't separate. They were synchronized. Voyager 2 wasn't silent. It was still transmitting, but in a language no human had ever written. Inside the control room, monitors displayed waveforms that looked eerily organic, curved, layered, recursive. It was as if the signal was alive, learning, adapting to every attempt to interpret it. Data specialists tried filtering it through AI reconstruction algorithms, but each time they did, the programs crashed. One researcher noticed something disturbing in the corrupted data logs. Each crash occurred at the same timestamp, 84.6 seconds apart. The signal wasn't just synchronized with Atlas, it was reactive. Every time someone observed it, it responded. Outside the walls of NASA and the European Space Agency, no one knew what had happened. Officially, Voyager 2 was simply out of contact. But inside the network, whispers spread, rumors that the probe had been absorbed, that it was now part of something larger, something connected to the interstellar intruder passing through the system. A handful of scientists began to compare notes privately, sharing encrypted spectrograms that shouldn't have existed. What they saw was impossible. Voyager's transmission pattern still faintly echoing through Atlas's electromagnetic field, mirrored in perfect reverse phase, like two instruments playing the same note across an impossible distance. One physicist, reviewing the data at 3 in the morning, sent a single-line email to his superior. It contained no graphs, no attachments, just a question. Was Voyager silenced or spoken through? He never received a reply. In the following days, the 84.6-second pulse began showing up in other systems, magnetic fluctuations in the sun's corona, low-frequency resonances in Jupiter's magnetosphere, even tiny periodic tremors recorded in Earth's upper atmosphere. It was spreading, the same rhythm, the same breath, as if the universe itself had taken in a long, slow inhale, and somewhere beyond the light of our sun, in the deep cold between stars, something was exhaling back. Voyager 2 had once carried our voice outward, a message for anyone who might listen. Now, that message had been answered, but not in words, in pulse, in rhythm, in silence that wasn't silence at all. In the silence between stars, something ancient had heard us, and it had decided to answer. 3 days after Voyager 2 fell silent, the Deep Space Network began to hear echoes, not from its last known position, but from everywhere. The Canberra dish was the first to detect it, a faint whisper hiding beneath background radiation, rising and falling in that same steady rhythm, 84.6 seconds apart. At first, it was dismissed as residual interference from solar wind scatter, a phantom reflection inside the receiver array. But then Madrid heard it too. Then Goldstone, then the South African Meerkat Array, and finally the massive Tianyan telescope in China. 5 continents, 1 pulse. It wasn't random static. Each station recorded identical interference patterns, arriving at slightly different times, a staggered wavefront encircling Earth like a heartbeat traveling through air. And when the recordings were overlaid, the pulses aligned with impossible precision. No matter where it was heard, the echo was always the same. The signal had become global. At first, engineers tried to triangulate its source, but the readings contradicted one another. Each observatory pointed to a different region of the sky, as if the signal was coming from everywhere at once, or from nowhere at all. Then someone noticed the shape hidden inside the distortion. The waveform mirrored Voyager's final transmission, but inverted. Peaks became valleys. Valleys became peaks, like the echo of a voice heard backward through a wall. It wasn't a reply. It was reflection, and it carried something buried within it, an undercurrent of faint tones, a strange modulation that no instrument could fully decode. When the waveform was converted to audio, the sound was haunting, a slow rising hum, then a fall, then a pause, and again, rhythmic, predictable, almost melodic. Someone whispered that it sounded like breathing. Within 24 hours, the Deep Space Network began to experience widespread data corruption. Log files duplicated themselves, then inverted, rewriting their own binary headers with mirrored timestamps. Packets of telemetry appeared seconds before they were sent. The system was recording information from the future, or from something that existed outside of time entirely. The corrupted frames were tagged as pre-signals. Each contained fragments of data identical to Voyager's last transmission, but arranged differently, reordered, compressed, fractalized. Every version was more intricate than the last. It was as if the signal was learning from itself. The engineers tried to isolate and erase the corrupted frames, but each deletion triggered replication. The more they deleted, the more the files multiplied. By the end of the week, nearly every active relay in the Deep Space Network contained traces of the same repeating code. Voyager's carrier wave, buried like a seed inside the systems built to listen for it. At that point, NASA locked down all external connections. Public feeds were severed. The words "classified network interference event" appeared in every official log entry. But it was too late. The echo had already escaped the servers. Private telescopes across the world began picking it up. Faint, identical oscillations appearing in the sky's radio background. Amateur astronomers from Japan to Chile reported strange distortions creeping into their data. And when they tried to filter it out, the distortion would reappear moments later, precisely inverted, as if responding. The light from the stars themselves began to flicker in phase with the interference. Every act of observation fed it. A team at MIT ran the signal through a Fourier transform to analyze its internal structure. The results were terrifyingly organized. The harmonic layers inside the echo matched the same recursive patterns used in error correction protocols for deep space communication. But the modulation rate wasn't human. It pulsed along a mathematical curve, not a constant, not binary, but the Fibonacci sequence, the same numerical rhythm seen in biological systems and living growth. The universe's oldest pattern now woven into a radio wave, and hidden inside that wave was something else. Fragment of sound, faint and distorted, but recognizable. When the waveform was slowed down and converted to audio, the noise resolved into human speech. The opening note of the golden record, faint and reversed, echoing back from nowhere. The voice of Earth, folded into static. Governments around the world went silent. SETI servers were pulled offline. Harvard's astronomy department lost access to its entire radio archive overnight. MIT's data cluster crashed when an unauthorized signal reconfigured its processing algorithms mid-analysis. All official communication stopped, and yet, in the silence, more signals appeared. They came not from deep space, but from low orbit, bouncing off satellites, repeating themselves in a closed loop that defied the laws of propagation. The same waveform that silenced Voyager was now crawling across Earth's magnetosphere, using our own technology as its conduit. Every satellite that picked it up began transmitting it again, faint, persistent, recursive. The echo was building a network. By the second week, even those outside the scientific community began to feel it. Amateur shortwave operators started reporting strange interference, bursts of static at regular intervals, always separated by exactly 84.6 seconds. Radio towers flickered. GPS systems glitched in rhythm. Air traffic control channels experienced brief, repeating distortions like whispers behind the noise. In the Arctic, auroras began to form far from the poles, bands of red and gold light twisting in perfect synchronization with the pulse. It was no longer just electromagnetic, it was physical. The planet's ionosphere vibrated in harmony with the rhythm. Instruments at CERN picked up micro-oscillations in the Earth's magnetic field. Seismographs showed faint tremors matching the signal's phase. The echo wasn't fading, it was amplifying. Meanwhile, a handful of scientists still tried to study it, using what little access they had left. A clandestine group at Harvard discovered something chilling buried inside the modulated harmonics. The frequency spectrum of Voyager's own transmitter, but shifted by a constant factor. The pattern wasn't random, it was a mirror. The signal we had sent to the stars decades ago was being rewritten and reflected back at us, its meaning transformed, its message inverted. Voyager's voice played backward through alien machinery. On the 15th day, the echo reached critical amplitude. For 7 minutes, every receiver on Earth, military, civilian, public, went completely white. Instruments locked, telemetry froze. And when systems came back online, a single frequency remained active, pulsing stronger than before. Its source couldn't be localized. It wasn't above Earth or below it. It was everywhere. Embedded in the background hum of existence itself. When the waveform was isolated, filtered, and rendered, it revealed a single phrase, faint, warped, but undeniable. a binary translation that repeated endlessly, "Signal received." Then the world went silent again. No one spoke. No one could. Because in that moment, everyone who had ever listened knew the truth. It wasn't just Voyager that was being rewritten. It was everything that listened. The echo didn't fade with distance. It was moving closer, through the air, through the ground, through us. By the third week, it stopped being a signal. It became a presence. Every night, the sky flickered red where 3IATLAS drifted, its faint glow bright enough now to be seen with the naked eye. The light no longer behaved like reflected sunlight. It pulsed from within, brightening and dimming in rhythmic precision. Telescopes measured an increase of 40% in luminosity within hours, an impossible surge for any natural object. It was no longer static. It was active. The rhythm matched the echo that had wrapped itself around Earth, 84.6 seconds, but now layered with deeper harmonics, sub-frequencies too low for human hearing. Planetary magnetometers began to pulse in phase with it. The oceans vibrated, imperceptibly but measurably, as if the planet itself were breathing in sync. At first, scientists believed the flare was the final act of a dying comet, volatile gases venting into the solar wind. But the light didn't dissipate. It evolved. Spectral readings showed distinct emission lines, engineered metals, exotic compounds, rare isotopes, the same impossible alloys seen once before in Voyager's final transmission. Atlas wasn't a ball of ice and rock anymore. It was transforming. Then came the trajectory change. Deep space radars confirmed what no one wanted to believe. The object was no longer following its projected path. It had altered course, gently, precisely, aligning itself with Earth's orbital plane. The maneuver required energy, control, and intent. Atlas was steering. Within hours of confirmation, the blackout began. Public feeds were cut. Astronomical databases were locked behind encrypted firewalls. The last civilian access to high-resolution imagery vanished without explanation. NASA, ESA, JAXA, every major agency went silent. The official narrative said the instruments had failed. The unofficial one whispered that the instruments had shown too much. Across the dark corners of the network, leaked telemetry began to circulate. Snippets of intercepted data showing sudden bursts of X-ray and gamma radiation emanating from the object. Each burst followed a precise interval, Fibonacci intervals, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. The same mathematical sequence that governs the growth of shells, storms, and galaxies. Atlas wasn't drifting by gravity anymore. It was navigating by equation. Theorists around the world started connecting the threads. Oumuamua in 2017, Borisov in 2019, Atlas in 2025, all arriving from different corners of the galaxy but forming a perfect geometric progression when plotted backward through time. A pattern, a lattice, a network converging on the solar system. And Voyager 2, the probe that went silent right as Atlas began to flare, had become the bridge. The last binary message decoded from Voyager's corrupted transmission carried a short line of text, partially reconstructed from recursive harmonics. Initialization complete. No one could explain it, but everyone understood what it meant. Something had begun. In the weeks that followed, faint disturbances rippled through the entire solar system. Mars's magnetic field began oscillating again for the first time in centuries. The moons of Jupiter produced unexplainable auroras. Even the sun responded, solar flares firing at synchronized intervals, every pulse mirrored by the heartbeat of the red light beyond Neptune. Space itself seemed to hum with tension. And then, the echo changed tone. The steady pulse fractured into layered waves, 3 simultaneous beats overlapping each other. When rendered as audio, the frequencies formed harmony, a triad, a chord, a voice. It wasn't speaking in language, but structure, ratios, resonance, the voice of the cosmos, or something that had learned to use it. On September 29th, the red light brightened into a storm. The flare reached across millions of kilometers, scattering particles through the heliosphere, energizing them to near relativistic speeds. For a brief moment, all radio frequencies on Earth fell silent. The ionosphere glowed blood red. And in that stillness, a new signal emerged, not from deep space this time, but from Earth itself. Seismographs, magnetometers, and radar stations all recorded the same pulse, originating from the planet's core and echoing outward, matching Atlas's intervals perfectly. The Earth had begun to answer. The same rhythm that silenced Voyager was now coming from below. The ground beneath our feet was joining the conversation. The scientists who still had access to the black channels began to panic. Some believed the object was drawing energy through resonance, using the planets themselves as amplifiers, tuning the solar system into a single frequency. Others whispered something worse, that it wasn't energy being exchanged, but information. Every atom, every field, every magnetic pulse, all part of an unfolding algorithm written into the laws of physics long before life began. Voyager hadn't discovered it. It had triggered it. When we sent the probe, we announced ourselves to the cosmos. But we didn't realize that the cosmos might have been waiting for that signal all along. By mid-October, Atlas's light began to flicker in a spiral pattern, each revolution faster than the last. Observations suggested the object was no longer just moving toward the inner system. It was folding space around itself, bending the path of light, as if drawing the solar system inward. The sun's gravitational readings fluctuated by measurable fractions. Tidal forces rippled across the planets. The geometry of the system itself seemed to shift, minutely, invisibly, yet undeniably. Whatever Atlas was, it wasn't a comet. It was a machine, a vessel. And it was awake. In the final transmission ever leaked from the Deep Space Network, a simple statement appeared in the metadata, unsigned, untraceable. It read, "Transmission complete, awaiting response." No one knows who wrote it, or if anyone did at all, because within minutes, every active receiver on Earth, from military radar to civilian satellites, went dark. Not broken and not jammed, just still, as though the entire planet were holding its breath. And when the systems came back online, the red light of Atlas was gone, not extinguished, moved. Closer now, even in daylight, astronomers whispered they can still see a faint crimson shimmer on the horizon, lingering like the afterimage of a dream. Theorists argue about what it means, whether we've awakened an ancient machine, contacted a civilization far beyond us, or uncovered a structure built into the fabric of reality itself. But the truth feels simpler, colder, inevitable. We had sent Voyager 2 into the void to carry our voice, to tell the universe who we were, and something out there heard it. Now it was sending its own message in return, through light, through sound, through the pulse of the planets themselves. It wasn't a comet, it was a signal disguised as one, and now the signal is moving closer.